Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Literature,
where we apply the revolutionary Mott scale
to classic and contemporary works of prose.
So, join us once again, won't you? Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Lost Signals Discusses Literature. I'm Jonathan Ian Manser, here with Scott Thurlow.
I'm down with the sickness.
Stephen Hermosi.
Hello.
Christopher Morgan.
Hi.
I love catching you guys off guard.
Today, we are doing Katherine Porter's 1939, and to get this right, because I know short novel?
She claims it's a novel. She wanted to be classified as a novel, even though it's like 80 pages. So, like, technically, if in the ratings of breaking it down, it's a novella.
Yeah, she called it a short novel. Yeah.
Yes, because definitions have meaning to them. Anyway, Katherine Anne Porter's 1939 short novel, Pale Horse, Pale Rider, which is also a collection of her short works. Yeah, but we looked at the titular or eponymous work, which we will discuss. Anyway, Chris, you had a log line?
Yes, flu goes there.
And if you like that one, good on you.
We got more puns to come. Well, we shouldn't be joking. This is actually a very serious work. I'm going to give it the plot now. It follows a young woman who works in the local newspaper named Miranda. I think she does cultural affairs and things like that. She meets a strapping young soldier who's about to go off to the Great War named Adam, and they have a short love affair.
Sort of a flame.
And then, like most great romances, the Spanish flu arrives and ruins their romance as she contracts Spanish flu, and it is an in-depth discussion of her dealing with being in the hospital, the fever dreams, all of that. And she awakens on Armistice Day, a couple months later, and to find out that Adam has passed from the influenza, partially from taking care of her. It is semi-autobiographical, or at least a kind of a fictionalized work of her actual life. Where she went and actually suffered from the Spanish flu. I believe lost her lover through that, and I think this one, it's timely considering what we're facing, but overall, I think this is a well-written. It feels contemporary, aside from the references to the events of the time, such as like bond gatherings and things like that. Overall, I think that the narrative is damn near perfect for what I wanted from a story like this. It handles the romance very well, not dwelling too much on the saccharine nature of it, but establishing them as, in a sense, two lost souls dealing with the current events. They kind of know it's going to end. There's a mournful tone throughout.
It's very melancholy.
Yeah.
Yes.
When the sickness hits, you really get captured in with her tragedy. I'm very impressed. So I'm leaning on a 3 for this.
I am as well. And just like, I guess we'll just fill out some historical stuff here, like, backstory, I guess. I was not familiar with the story at all, but apparently it is one of, if not the most recognized works that focuses, like, doing this, like, experience, right? So yeah, as you said, it's very heavily fictionalized, autobiographical, but like for the most part, you could see like that it was her experience, like in real life. Katherine had the flu and went through this and lost a lover and so forth. So it was written like just on the cusp of the onset of World War II, like just historical, minds, and to put it in context. So yeah, given that, And I wasn't expecting it to be. I was expecting it to be a little bit more stilted, like a little like, oh man, it's obviously of the times, and which it is, but not to the degree that I was ready for. So yeah, I think it holds up. It's strong. I think it's paced very very well, like pretty perfectly, really, and doesn't overstay its welcome, but it does uh get you into the mindset and humanize it. Like it makes it personalized to in a way in which you can sympathize with. And for that reason, and perhaps a couple others, what you guys might say, but I'm looking at a strong 3 as well. A pretty damn strong 3, at least a solid 3 for plot. So with that, go to my friends.
Yeah, I mean, I love this story, start to finish. In terms of the plot, it was just really well paced, really well laid out. You gave the overview of it. There's so much in here that's like, her fever dreams are not only these like really well done hallucination sequences in this, but also play into the overall plot itself, like what she's going through and what she's feeling. Like it's just really, really well done in terms of overlaying these kind of like surreal dream sequences on top of like this really down to earth story of a sad a sad love story and
tragic encounter.
yeah, and it's just done really well. I couldn't agree more. I think it's going to be a pretty easy 3 for me.
Right on.
Yeah, as I for those not watching, you just spilled water in my eye. Okay. No, there it's hard to say anything more than you guys said without going into style. And I love the narrative of this story, because she does perfectly. Delirium, fever dream is perfect. How you go in and out of reality.
Certainly the highlight, which we will discuss more. But Chris,
I'm just saying there's a fluidity to this that is just magnificent. I can't really say it was. It's wonderful. I'd give it a 3.
All right.
So we all agree that it's a great story and give it all 3s.
It's
Scott,
also heartbreaking, even though the heartbreak's coming. It's still heartbreaking.
It's you can see it coming. It's foreshadowed, but like that doesn't negate the tragedy of it.
Yeah.
Well, the foreshadowing and the callbacks are near perfect, especially as you mentioned, Steve, with the delirium. Anyway, Scott, onto you with themes.
So I think it sort of flows on from what we just said about plot. Really, it's that I'm giving it a 1. Like mark it down. Yeah, because it's so personalized and like obviously the author went through this experience, at least something like it, like close enough. And yeah, it's going to also bleed over to style, which we'll get to. But it's almost like a Shakespearean kind of thing, right? A tragic story between two like young lovers essentially that are in the situation that both the World War One and the Spanish influenza is happening to them, and they're trying to live their lives, like trying to be together in the way that they can be, but knowing like each of their situations. And I think it's very it resonates incredibly well. And that's kind of all I have to say. Like I know it's very general, but that's the whole reason. Like it's so impactful that it's just all of it subtly built in through the story throughout, that it just works incredibly well. And yeah, it hits you and it resonates and it's impactful. So go ahead.
One thing I found really interesting about this is between the bondsmen that came in and threw all that nationalistic bullshit on your head, and it's just like, oh, these guys could obviously afford to buy bonds, but they're laying it on you, even though you don't buy bonds. The funny thing is, she almost seems to be. I don't know if she was legitimately giving a critique. I mean, the United States hadn't entered into World War II yet.
Between the lines, Chris, he certainly was.
Yeah, but the funny thing is she was, when she wrote this, United States hadn't gotten to World War II yet, and the second nationalists sacrifice everything for the greater goods, buy bonds. That stuff she addresses, the sexism she addresses. I mean, right away, women not making equal to men. I mean, any one of these themes
Being looked down on. Yeah, you're right. Exactly.
is all these themes are addressed in there, whether or not that was her intent. Loud and clear, these things were projected, and they're projected. I don't know. It was so matter of factly. I kind of wondered if she put this in there thinking, well, this is going to get by the censors because it is part of the window dressing, where she's critiquing it and they're like, yeah, that's the way it is. So yeah, I'm definitely giving it a 1. There's so much to that she's saying, whether it wasn't intended at the time or if it was just, me interpreting it. That was a fantastic job.
No, just real quickly, like to add on to your point, Chris, all that stuff is like organically there. And I know we use that term like maybe in danger of overusing it, but I think it is fitting to describe it in this case for themes. So.
It's lived experience that you can definitely tell when she's writing. What I found fascinating was both the war and the influenza existed on the periphery at the start of this. Yeah. And until it hit home, did they realize what it meant. And one of the importance of this is that, like war, disease can often be relegated to statistics. To a personal example, I think we're in New Jersey right now, and our governor has been posting pictures of people who have died from COVID and giving little bios on them. Way to humanize an abstract event. And I think that this is actually one of the best works I've ever seen humanizing. Yeah, because people died in 1918 from the influenza. It happens, This is actually one of the more even like if you look at Camus' The Plague, that was but that was almost it was an outsider looking inward at this is a personal account of how influenza ruined my life. And but that's but that's very important. It is and it hits home the effect. So I'm going to give it a very strong 1.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. I think that there are several, like, on top of the, like, I don't know. I almost like the flu part of this feels like a plot point, whereas like the anti-war argument feels like a theme.
I think they're all there, buddy.
The sexism for sure is like a built-in theme to this, and I don't think there's any. In my mind, there's no question about she meant to put that stuff in there.
Certainly.
And it certainly, I think she does a very good job of writing it in subtly, but making it clear that that's what she's talking about. There's the theme of like having the with everything that's going on right now with COVID, I've been fervently researching a lot of shit about this disease and previous diseases. So like during World War I, we had 110,000 Americans died, I believe, in World War I, and
in the war itself, you're saying
50,000 of them died in battle, and 60,000 of them died from the flu, right? So more American soldiers died from the flu than from
the actual
war, right? Which is crazy.
That's fucking intense.
But just a way to put all this stuff into perspective. And I think that this does a great job of like not only showing how it was affecting everyone, but showing how it was affecting people on a personal level. And like giving them micro, macro kind of scale at the same time, while still building in this fucking great, like surreal, really fascinating when the theme of like when your body fails you and your mind starts to like betray you. like what does that mean in terms of who you are as a person? Like this story in 80 pages or whatever it is talks about so much shit. That's why I love it so much, because like there's so much going on. There's this like there's like philosophical exploration of her own internal, you know, fight to stay alive and like to give in to death at one point. And like at, you know, towards the whole end of it, she's like putting on a brave face because everybody's like, oh, aren't you so happy you're alive? And she's like, not really. I kind of wish I had died, and like I was ready to die. And
Darkly, like,
is this all it is? Like there's this whole philosophical exploration of that. It's a fucking great great just, you know, short novel, as she calls it, in terms of all the things that it discusses in a very, you know, in a pretty short time. I have to give it, if I could give it more than 1 point for themes, I would give it more than 1 point. But I absolutely love this book, or this, you know, I'll call it a book, and what it does for storytelling in general. Like I think it did a lot with a small amount of, you know, in a small amount of pages.
She covered a huge range.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's me. I'm gonna give it a 1.
Like a 1.
Well, Mr. Mosi, keep talking because you're on to Antagonist.
Sure. So for a lot of this story, it's the war, I think, and her worries about losing this guy that she just met, who she's really into, to the war. He talks about like he's definitely gonna die. The odds of survival in the type of platoon or whatever that he's in are like nothing. He's like, what do you think? How long do you think it takes when we hit the ground? It's like 9 seconds or something like that.
So Sivo, I believe specifically it said he was the sapper. He was in the sapper unit,
Mhm.
which is a very dangerous job.
Yeah.
It was for sure in World War One, at least. Yeah.
That's exactly what it was. And so there's all that. And then the antagonist turns to, it's not even really the flu, right? The flu is just a what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. The flu just like kind of shows you that the real antagonist is, at least in terms of this story, it kind of gives her access to her mind, to a weird part of her mind, right? Like
it puts things in perspective for her.
Yeah, exactly. And like, you know, you see her having her own psyche kind of turn against her at certain points in this. Not that I necessarily think that her own psyche is the antagonist, but it does play that role for a little bit, right? And like, this is an interesting one. I'm probably gonna give it a 1, just because it's kind of giving me fits trying to like trying to pin it down. But I think that it's not necessarily, doesn't necessarily need to be pinned down in terms of what the antagonist is, right? Like it's there. She does feel antagonized throughout the entire time certainly by her own psyche. Like she's always in her head, and you're in her head too. So you hear all her like inner doubts and things like that. But it's almost like the force of the world coming down upon her or something like that, you know. I don't know exactly how to say it, but that's kind of where I fall on this.
So I'll maybe take the liberty of trying to rephrase it, and I think Chris will also build on it with me, because we are the ones who often, it's abstracted, but yet it's also personalized, right? In an amazingly done way, the way it's written. So yes, it's the specter of the war, right, Steve? It's the specter of her, especially when she actually, of course, gets the influenza, right? But it's also beyond that at the same time. So like it's I think you even said it, like it's both microcosmic and macrocosmic somehow at the same time. And on paper, that probably seems that it shouldn't work. But in this instance, it does. And it is very, again, it hits home a la themes, a la what we just said. So yes, of course I'm giving it a 1, but I think because of that, because it's like spread out amongst these different areas, and the angles that she approaches it, yes, it's personalized. Like I said, like you said, you get it from her psyche, from her mindset, right? But also there's a shadow like overclouding everything as well on top of that, which is especially effective. So yeah.
If like really quickly, I want to just talk about this concept of like the macrocosm versus microcosm thing. I had a acquaintance a while ago who wrote a paper on this idea. It's called stapled in wolf space, where it's like Olaf Stapledon did books that were like all about these enormous concept, like long timeline, universal.
I've read Last First Men.
And yeah, exactly. And Virginia Woolf does these stories that are just like very personal, very like small. So like he was talking about stories that kind of either did one or the other, or stories that kind of embraced both. And I think this one, not to either degree, but does kind of that similar thing where it's like the whole world and her own personal self are kind of
Exactly
right there together. So
well said, buddy.
Abel in Wolf Space, not my invention, but a pretty interesting concept
And applicable here. All right. What do you think, Chris?
I was going to say it's interesting that this thing's framed in and out of fever dreams. Like when the book first started, it took me a second to realize, wait, we're just waking up out of a dream. Because to both of your guys' points, in dreams or whatever, the mind, creates
A structure of some sort.
Fucking had it. You makes manifest in different aspects those things that antagonize us. And like you said, everything you guys said about the micro macro internalization of those things, but I think it was a really, really smart decision, and it's gonna make style a lot easier when we get there, to frame it in the way that she did, because she can address all these things, and she can address all these things in reality and the fever dream, and they just flow right into one another
at once. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly, buddy.
Well, it's obviously the Huns, but
All right.
but
Trollololo.
but to your point though, Steve, I absolutely like your analysis on that. Reminds me a bit of Weltschmerz, German concept of the pain of how life is versus how life should be, and I especially since it's kind of told in retrospect often, or has the feeling of there is, because there's always that sense of loss. There's that sense of an incoming car crash that's going to happen. I because it's told in retrospect, often that initial antagonism is diluted to that you get the immediate antagonist of the character, but also that of the external antagonist that you're talking about, or that greater one. So yeah, I'm fully going to say give this a 1. That's a 1's all around.
Yep.
All right, Chris, talk about protagonist, the bail bondsman, or not the bail bondsman, the bail seller.
The bail bond. Yeah, real quick, for anybody who's watching this video, in case you're wondering what I'm doing, my dog decided to sleep right under where I'm putting my feet, so yeah, I'm trying to keep him there so we don't knock into any wires or anything here. So the protagonist is Miranda, and I cannot remember if she has a last name or not.
I think she probably does. I don't remember it either.
But no, I mean, her name is Miranda.
It's Katherine Anne Porter.
And this film is, God,
what film?
The story is very.
I don't blame you. It's a very visual novel.
Well, I think Ian and I were talking precast. Is just like I was reading off of a PDF, and sometimes I'd hit the wrong button. I'd shoot a couple pages forward, and I'd go back to try to remember, try to figure out where I'd left off. And I didn't remember the words, but I remember the feelings. I remember the sensations. I remember the visualizations. And this is such a great character piece for a protagonist, because she does all those things, a protagonist is supposed to do. Okay, here's the world, here's her interacting with people, da 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 da. But the degree to which she's able to analyze herself, the people around her, in all the layers that she can, again, given how this story was written, she's an incredible protagonist. I really didn't. I kind of. I wasn't really sure if she was gonna. It was gonna be one of those. I don't know. Maybe if this was written like 6 years later, you would have had that drift off. Like these are her last words as she dies. But I kind of had a feeling she wasn't gonna die, and they kind of um, gave foreshadowed a bunch of other stuff implicitly and explicitly. Um, but you never got that whole narrative sense where, well, that would be the last time so and so is there, or blah blah blah. It was part of this whole this as part of this whole fabric of this story that's being told, and I had to keep reminding myself it wasn't in first person. It is a third person story in first person, which is making talking about the protagonist very difficult because it's hard. You're her, but you're also looking at her at the same time. So I'm giving her a 1. She's fantastic. I think she's a great protagonist. I'm really throwing a lot into style right there, so you can go ahead. But yeah, I'm giving her 1. She was, really well done.
I think that's why so well, Chris. Like, not that it's difficult because you're both within and without her psyche, and yeah, it's very much for the most part autobiographical. With some fictionalized elements attached to it, but that's the reason why I think it's so effective. And of course, I'm giving it a 1 for sure officially. But like, I'm just saying, like, if you fuck up your own autobiography, that's a weird thing. Like, it'd be weird if you did that. But in this instance, it is super, again, extremely effective and extremely affecting because of the way Catherine is able to balance her. Essentially, Miranda is her XP in her story, but that means you get so much insight to her character, and you understand where she's coming from, why she's feeling it, and what's happening to her. So, I mean, that's pretty much my analysis of it.
But it was very smart to have. I'm building a point that it allows that. Yeah, you have the immediacy, you have insight into her, but it allows Katherine Porter to have a distance and have a overview or a non-judge, not a non-judgmental, but
removed viewpoint from it or something like that. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
It's almost a way to retrospect on it that I think is handled very well. She felt like a very real character, more so than like a very fleshed out, fictionalized version of it. So yeah, it worked for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that the protagonist, Miranda, very strong, very well done. It's interesting. You get to know her kind of from the outside at first, and then you get very well acquainted with her psyche and like all of her subliminal shit that's going on. While I feel like this for Katherine Anne Porter, this is almost her like revisiting her psyche from the time that she
to deal with, and it's still
yeah. So like, I just think it's a very well done protagonist. One of the like a standout from basically anything I've ever read. Like this is something that's gonna probably stick with me for a while.
Among the stronger points.
Yeah. Completely.
All right, well, it's one's all around. I'm going into sporting. Well, we haven't met Adam. I think is the most important of the side characters.
Certainly.
He is also a fairly fleshed out character. You get very intimate moments, his fears, his desires, what would have been if he had been going off to war.
Sketch of who he is.
Yeah. You have the Bond salesman. I can finally say that term correctly. Um, actually, there's multiple versions of them, but you get a sense of both the types of bondsmen, where you have the more professional pushers, and then you have the people who never did anything with their lives, can't fight in the war, so they're going full force onto yeah. And then you have all her acquaintances at the
colleagues.
yeah. So I think it's a very fleshed out world. Our landlady, Adam's the most important one, and the believable romance that they built up really sells the work and is kind of the emotional force throughout this.
Yeah, I mean, I agreed on much. Right, certainly Adam is the side character, I think, because like it's who she's focused on. It informs her life and psyche, as we said, but also like there's just the a tiny ish bit of levity with like her editor, who she describes him as a cliche of editors. Like he's chomping on a cigar and he's like yelling like, "I need that fucking story now!" Like
This is J. Jonah Jameson.
yeah. Steve, yeah. So like, while it's a limited like cast of characters and secondary wise, but they are so well done, given for the time that they are let to breathe, that I have to give them a 1. And that's all.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that the supporting characters are really strong in this and really flesh out the world. Adam, first and foremost. Honestly, Adam doesn't flesh out too much of the world other than he's a soldier, and he fleshes Miranda's character out.
And they allow conversations about the state of the world at that moment.
Yeah.
So
but they're like, so what I really like about this is they're both trying to like flee thinking about those things anytime they're together, which makes a lot of sense, of course, right? Like you just want to be with each other, like the two young lovers, right? They just want to be with each other. They don't want to think about Adam going to die in war, or like the flu that's fucking creeping up everywhere, things like that. And then you have her friend Townie, Mary Townsend, who I think somebody mentioned, and like she's just a great like supporting friend character, like just like a fun like side character. You got what was his name, Charles or something?
Maybe one of the other writers at the paper.
Who was like the sports writer, but he was like, I really want to write about theater, and they won't give me the chance because Miranda does it. So she gives him his article as she's starting to get sick, and like there's just such good little character moments for pretty much every character in this story, that I have to give it absolute full credit for supporting.
Yep, right on.
One of the things I liked about this, talking about world building, is the characters at the other tables, whether you're getting their conversations or not, are like as memorable as anything else here, because they do really have a purpose. I do have something.
Good call.
Yeah, I mean, everything does have a purpose, and the world is so fleshed out and colorful, and you can picture everything so well. This is going to sound like a really random comparison, but even though they're taking
Better not be Star Trek.
No, it's not. Though I'm wearing a Star Trek shirt. No, I was thinking even though these stories take place at opposite ends of World War II. This is the world that the people who made Sophie's Choice thought they were making. Because
I get what you're saying.
There was one or two things I'm like sitting here going, it kind of remind me of it, but not really, because that was an artifice. This isn't. So I mean that is, I'm not detracting from the story, but I'm like saying this is the way to do a story like this. This is the way to do it.
I like it.
Thank you.
Excellent call.
For supporting.
Like it.
All right, Scott, would you like to continue with dialogue?
I certainly would. So I'm gonna give it a 1 again officially, but on the onset, like again, I wasn't sure what to expect with the story for real. Like I was not not familiar with it. Like apparently / allegedly it is time and what was happening. So given that, I'm going to give it a lot of credit. And I do have a little thing in my notes. It not directly, I guess I'm not saying it's a one. It's somewhat. I somewhat got the feel of a Flannery O'Connor, not like a story to it, and maybe that also bleeds over into style. But yeah, so like I do and did feel upon when I was reading it that it was natural, that it made sense. There was nothing stilted, or if there was a few stilted things, it was in no way overshadowing the actual like organic, like believable characterization to what the characters were saying in terms of actual dialogue to each other and exchanging throughout the story. So again, yes, I'm giving it like maybe like less of like a strong one than other stuff, but certainly still a one because I think it worked, and it especially like even, and again, yes, this is going to bleed over to style a little bit. The fever stuff also like was probably the most standout part of it, like or at least aspect of it to me. So in that sense, because of that, I'm going to give dialogue, the actual dialogue in that is contained in the story, a lot of credit, and um, that Catherine like did a very, very, very good job of making it seem natural and without removing you from the story. Like, oh, why would the character say this and that to each other? No, everything that was fucking like spoken, exchange between characters made sense and was relevant, and therefore I'm giving it a one.
Yeah, I agree with that. I will go on to say I honestly I probably feel more strongly about the dialogue being in the one category than even you do.
Fair enough.
I think there's a lot of really great conversations that happen in this with like that have a lot of subtext to them, and like there's a lot
I mean,
that
you're right. I don't
happens
disagree.
within and underneath the conversations that are being had.
Yep.
There's also like this really strange, and this is like a mix of dialogue and style, but there's this really strange thing of like her inner monologue almost feels like it's dialoguing with the people outside of herself at certain
Yeah,
points.
yeah.
So
No,
like it seems like you like I had
seriously, Steve,
like there were a
that is
couple
a
times.
very good point.
Yeah, there were a couple times I had to go back and like make sure there weren't quotes around things that were like in the story. I was like, okay, this is like inner monologue, and like I was like, all right, yeah, like you almost have to go back and look and see where the quotes are in the actual text to like know whether she's saying this shit out loud or or it was just in her head. And like I love that in terms of the story, especially as it devolves into a story of her like kind of losing her mind due to like flu fever dream, um and that gets more and more like muddled, the line between reality and what's going on in her head. But they set that up from the very beginning in a really, or she sets it up from the very beginning in such a really interesting way. I really love the way that that's done. So I almost I half count that part, like even the stuff that's not actually like quote unquote dialogue.
Sure, no, I get you.
I kind of half count that as dialogue because you're made to feel as though it might be, and you have to like go and check and make sure that it's not like several times. So yeah.
I listened to the audiobook version of this. That was even worse.
Right. Yeah.
Because you don't have the visual quotes there. You don't know what is being spoken and what is being thought. And you're right. It kind of has this wonderful mixture of the two that goes through. So I agree completely with your point.
And to build on what Steve-O said, the thing, because I had it in my notes as well, the thing I like about it is whether it's in reality or whether it's in a dream to herself or to others, it's such a great snapshot of where she is emotionally. Because in the beginning, where we it starts off in a dream, there's a confidence about her, there's pragmatism about her, but there's also that hinging self-doubt. I mean, throughout it, the dialogue, whether internal or external, gives you such a great snapshot of where she is, who she is. It's definitely getting a one.
You are right.
I to build off what Steve-O said.
I like the way. Yeah, I like the way you described that. Absolutely, 100%, buddy.
All right, Stephen. Style.
Well, like I said, part of the style is what I just mentioned. The swapping
over.
between this internal and internal monologue and dialogue, that's really fascinating. The but that notwithstanding, the most interesting part of this, I think, and I think we'll all probably agree, is the fever dreams she has while sick are fascinating, like little philosophical, side shoots out of this. Like it's really interesting
It's certainly the highlight.
to see it go into like this really existential reading into life and like what's going on during the Great War, and like what does life mean, and is it worth it to continue on, and like it goes in and out of that, like when she comes out of her fever dreams and is like screaming to the doctor, like there's just so many great stylistic, like, I don't know, flourishes, I guess, that go on throughout this whole story. And they start off slow, but they like build and build and build throughout till at the end it's like holy shit. And then you get the last, like, knife in the heart
The final line is so hardcore.
of her. Yeah, well, I was actually gonna read that. So like the whole final paragraph is she goes through all this, and then her lover, she finds that she gets a letter that her lover died in the war, but not from war, from influenza, from flu, which who knows, for all we know she might have given it to him, right? Like he might have gotten it from her.
It's very heavily implied that is the case.
And then she just gets in a cab, and the last paragraph says, no more war, no more plague, only the day's silence that follows the ceasing of the heavy guns. Noiseless houses with the shades drawn, empty streets, the dead cold light of tomorrow. Now there would be time for everything. And it's like, holy shit, man. Like,
Time enough at last.
If you're talking about style, like, god damn, how can it get better than that as like a closing, like ending line? Like it brings to mind like some of the best ending lines, in literature. And goddamn, that's fucking right on. I love the style of this story. I loved it from the start, and it only built and got better throughout the entire thing. So I got to give it a very strong one.
No, I agree. Like I said, I wasn't sure what to expect, and like maybe I was expecting, like, perhaps because of history blindness, bias, if you will, some stiltedness. It was incredible, and it had like the perfect poeticism to it, I guess I want to say, right? Without being too over the top, but yeah, giving, as we just said, everything you said, the insight to the character and her feelings, motivations, etc. Like everything about her and other characters that surround her. And yeah, holy crap, I think style might be the most impressive thing to me about the story, which is impressive in many other fronts as well, for sure, right? And yeah, that is like it. Nowadays, it takes quite a bit to like get to me with something like that, and it got to me. So like I have to give that credit, and I like, and I just feel sort of slightly bad that I was not familiar with the story beforehand, not knowing that it even existed really, and what it was about and what it addressed, and now having read it and knowing it, god damn, it is fucking amazing, and it is so well executed throughout that I just can't say enough. Really, like, yeah, of course, a one. And I guess the only other final thing, I guess I mentioned the Fanny Orcano thing, and like it was always like a gift to the Magi kind of thing, Steve-O. Like eventually, like
Sure.
the foreshadowing was set up, like, yeah, so like yes, it's like a Shakespearean Romeo and Juliet thing, kind of, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's darkly tragic, it's tragic comedy in a sense.
Except at the end of that, they just laughed because they had lost a fucking watch and a comb or whatever the fuck, and their hair.
Right. I'm just saying, like, but I mean,
Into
it is
this.
yeah, it is the ending and the atmosphere that it has to be,
Yeah.
and it just, again, it hits you if you have any emotions left whatsoever. The style is going to get to you, and I'm giving it a 1.
I think the line, I might be butchering it, but it's something akin to this. is this skin my own, or is it what I wear to cover my modesty? Was like that. Yeah, she gets introspective.
Sorry, I was saying there were so many good lines in this.
But yeah, the introspective does hit when she's going through, but she's introspective throughout the entire thing, whether it's about war, whether it's about relationships, whether it's about like
sorry, whether she's like of a sound like fever dreams or just like thinking about stuff like that. Yeah, right.
it's great throughout. So I'm giving it a very strong one.
I made a note earlier because over the summer we reviewed Starship Troopers, which to I think all of our shock we each gave a 10 to, because the themes were so strong, and the style delivered on those themes so strongly. You could not
can't deny it. Yeah.
You could not divorce any that. You've got two polars right here. You've got themes and you got style. There's no way to divorce anything else from them because they're so strong. This is the case with this thing. There's a reason that every time we talk about something, we're like, oh, we're going into style or whatever, because you cannot divorce the two. There were themes going on. This was, in my opinion, the only way to have told. Of course, this is a one person story, so it is obviously the only way to tell it, but this is an extremely effective way that this story was told. And I couldn't think of a better way to have the story being told. So this is getting a very strong one for me.
Absolutely, Chris. Spot on. Agreed.
So, Chris, would you recommend Starship Troopers? Pale Horse, Pale Rider.
Yes. I foreshadowed my own score there. Yes, I'm going to give it a 1. So chalk me up for a 10.
Yeah, I mean, yes. Read the story, and I will give E credit, or however you found it. Like, this sort of happenstance, I guess, like, to a degree, doesn't matter. Fucking read the story. It is impactful. It still stands, and like maybe it's like, it's still like it echoes, I suppose, because of the influenza of the pandemic aspect to it, but it's so much more than that, and it is so well constructed that it deserves a read. So
yeah, 10 me up on this bad boy. I'm gonna go back and read the other 2 stories in this short story collection.
Hold on.
And probably read this one again.
Short novel collection. God damn it.
Sorry, short
she was
novel
doing
collection.
Stephen King before Stephen King was even fucking born. So
yeah. And she will be goddamned if you call him novella or a short story. You're right. Short novel collection. But yeah, apparently I've been reading reviews of the other 2, and apparently they're also quite good. So this is like the book that put her on the map as one of the great American short story writers. And the other 2 were about some other really interesting parts of Americana. So I think that, or as far as I know, I have not read them, as you know, but
we will soon, though. Sure.
I am really looking forward to checking out more of her stuff, and I'm glad. Thank you, Ian, for introducing us.
Don't thank me. Thank COVID.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how did you find this?
Thanks, Death Flu.
Well, there's
Death virus.
We talked a while back about works created out of disease and plagues, and how influenza they often trace back to the plague as their frame of reference. So I was like, is anything ever written about the Spanish flu? And people are like, read this. This is as important as any other work on disease in general, but it is the definitive work on the Spanish flu.
Yeah, consensus agrees. Like, really, I guess we'll speak for all of us. Like, I feel somewhat guilty of like not knowing that this story existed previously, because it is that good, and it does address that, and we even covered the plague, Camus' The Plague, and I think this rivals that.
I think it's better than
it might be better than it. Yeah.
So anyway, that gives us a perfect 10 for the story. 10, yes. I think this is a phenomenal work. I agree completely with that score, and I think everyone should read it. And if you want, there's a really good audio version of it. I think it's a amateur just reading it. And you know what? That seems about right. Like this isn't something audio Audible does a book on.
They
No,
would
this
never
is
cover
this
it.
is someone who loved this work who's saying, "God, I'm going to read it for the world." To hear." And she puts a lot of passion to it. I'll make sure that we have the link of that in our
Yep,
description.
we'll do that.
Yeah, please do.
So, anyone have any other thoughts,
Nah,
comments?
fucking A, Horse Paraglider, amazing. Check it out.
I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer here with Stephen Rossi,
Still dying of the plague.
Christopher Morgan,
Have a good night.
and Scott Thurler.
My entire life is a fever dream, of course. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Cheers. Good night.
Stay alive out there.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.